It's this feeling of emptiness. Someone is missing, and because it's my child that I deeply love and I'm connected to, I'd feel a sense of emptiness or a void in my heart that would actually ache. I remember aching when Annika was gone.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. We are very grateful for you and encouraged by you as you share your feedback with us, right? Thanks so much for those of you who have left a rating and a review. We just had one come in that was titled Relationship Saver.
I love that.
I know. They went on to say, this podcast has without a doubt helped save our relationship. Wow. That is super encouraging. And it's exciting to know that this couple's experiencing some hope for their future. And they're getting some tools as well that's going to help them make that happen.
Right.
So thanks so much for sharing with us. And by the way, if you have a question or a suggestion for the show, you can leave that over on the ratings and reviews. But another way to do that is you can reach out to us anytime by going to mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. And we personally read every communication that you send, and we'll see how we can help.
Sure. Yeah.
So don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, how about we hop into episode 84?
Yeah, honey, there's one thing that I've learned after 20 years of living in blended family life.
20 years. What were we, like 14 when we got married or something?
Oh, hardly. But there's one thing we've learned, and that is there will be tensions in step family life. A lot of tensions. Yeah. And, not just relational tension between family members and between households, but also emotional tensions that exist for each individual within the family.
Yeah.
And, the key here is not to necessarily eliminate all those tensions, but rather it's about learning to live well in the tension, which I think we all want to be able to do,
I agree.
right?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then we'll need to learn how to manage our emotional tensions through all of the ups and downs that come along with blended family dynamics.
Totally.
Because they're not going to be eliminated anytime soon, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
So we need to deal with them. And we want to focus on just one of the emotional tensions that many bio parents experience to some extent while their kids are away, spending time with the other bio parent, over at the ex's home.
That's right.
And, this isn't everyone's dynamic. Back in episodes 81 and 82, we explored the different challenges that happen when the other bio parent isn't in the picture at all, which brings a unique set of challenges as well.
Yeah, that's funny. Like a lot of people might wish they had that dynamic, but it actually brings its whole other world of complexities. Yeah.
But if you've got biological kids moving back and forth between homes, I know how emotionally difficult that can be. And there can be a deeper layer of complexity if you've remarried someone who also has kids of their own, and their kids either don't spend any time or as much time away from your home as your own kids do. So there's this imbalance. And, in this scenario, one partner might end up spending more time with their stepkids than their own biological kids.
Yeah, that can be emotionally tough.
Yeah, this can be a really tough reality that can intensify the kind of emotional tensions that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, totally. We talk a lot about how blended families are formed out of loss. And the result is grief that's experienced in one way or another by everyone in the family. And today's topic is really about the sense of loss that a bio parent experiences when they have to send their kids to the other home and they're left missing them and maybe longing for them. And if you're that bio parent, there can be some ongoing grief that you might be experiencing. And we just want to help you to explore a few ways to manage that today.
And it's ongoing every time.
Mm-hmm. Now, no one really wants to talk about grief, right? It's not a fun subject. But as we know from experience, when there's an emotional tension, if you don't talk it out, you'll end up acting it out, and we've heard lots of stories of that kind of thing, this ongoing grief being acted out in the blended family dynamic. And it causes confusion and anxiety. And sometimes it can really be paralyzing. The pain is tough to deal with.
Yeah.
And this emotional tension doesn't just impact the bio parent. It can be difficult whether you're the one struggling when you're separated from your kids while they're at the ex's house, or if you're the spouse who's been blindsided by this tension in your partner and you're really struggling to understand these dynamics or how you might be able to help them when that grief hits. So we want you to just hang in there with us today as we talk about this kind of grief. It's a really important subject.
Yeah, and it is a hard thing to talk about because it's so emotionally sensitive. And I think sometimes it takes us by surprise. We logically understand that when we get divorced and have shared custody, that our kids will be spending a significant amount of time with our ex.
Yep.
But it can be a tough reality to accept that this means we'll be physically separated from them more than we'd really like to be.
Absolutely.
And even if it's a relatively small amount of time that you're separated, it can be difficult when you're constantly thinking about your kids, you're wondering what they're doing and if they're okay. I used to think about my daughter, Annika, a lot at night when she was at her dad's house and she was gone, because she was prone to night terrors. And her dad and her stepmom handled the night terror situation very differently than we did in our home.
Sure.
So I would think about her being alone, scared and upset over there if she'd had a night terror and not being given that kind of comfort or support that I wanted to be able to give her. And I knew she wasn't getting it there. And it would break my heart. I would have a hard time sleeping sometimes. Or even relaxing at night because I was so worried about her.
Sure.
I also remember counting down the days, then the hours, and even the minutes until I'd be reunited with Annika because I just miss seeing her cute little face and I miss holding her and hearing her sweet little voice. And of course, over time, it gets a little easier, not the being separated part, but just knowing that it's part of the deal and that she'll be coming back. So it becomes more and more routine. But the missing and the longing never completely went away for me.
Sure.
And, my ex and I separated when Annika was only around 1.5 years old.
Right.
So I did this for a long time. So even after we had 2 kids together, honey, Annika was always on my mind while she was at her dad's house.
Sure.
You know how I struggled with that.
I do.
And then, of course, I'd also get really anxious. And then we'd have some more emotional tension when you and our younger kids wanted to go and do something fun during the time when Annika was gone at her dad's.
For sure.
I didn't want her to miss out, and I didn't want to create any family memories without her in them.
That's understandable.
So I looked for reasons to put things off until Annika was back in our home. And this was especially hard around the holidays. There were all these fun events and we wanted to attend them and they were on specific dates. And if those dates didn't line up with our time that we had Annika, it really caused a struggle because you guys would want to go anyway, but I wouldn't. And I would struggle just thinking about going out and doing something fun without Annika. And then when we did go, I would have a hard time relaxing and enjoying it. I'd feel really guilty and I couldn't stop thinking about how much Annika would have enjoyed whatever it was we were doing. Then I'd feel guilty about how my sulky funk was impacting you and the kids. And I'd vacillate back and forth from a melancholy mood to kind of this feigned enthusiasm. And of course, the whole time I'd worry about how Annika might react later when she realized we'd gone and done something fun without her. I'd worry, is she going to feel that she was left out? Would she think that we purposely went without her? Would she be sad if she heard the other kids talking about how much fun they had, if she saw pictures that we took that day? It was really hard for me. And honestly, sometimes these worries were really irrational. Annika really didn't care a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But there were other times that I could tell that she felt left out or disappointed that she didn't get to experience something in particular with us.
Yeah.
And if you have kids that express disappointment because they've missed out on something fun going on in your home, or if they've missed out on something happening in their other home, you might want to go back and check out episode 71, which is all about helping kids cope with painful disappointment. And we'll put a link in the show notes if you've got kids that are struggling in this way.
Yeah.
But today we're really talking about us, the adults that are struggling with these painful emotions and these tensions that come up.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of that. And I remember also kind of understanding why you felt that way and why you would hesitate to go and do fun stuff with me and the kids that Annika just couldn't be included in because it happened when she wasn't around at our place. And it felt like you expected our lives sometimes to just be put on hold until Annika returned.
Yeah.
And then we could resume with the fun stuff after that, right?
That's exactly what I expected.
But that was an unrealistic expectation.
Right.
And it was frustrating for me. It was challenging because I wanted to be understanding, but it caused some disagreement and tension with us as well over the years.
Absolutely.
And still does sometimes, actually, when you're really focused on making sure that we're including Annika, and the rest of us just want to kind of do what we're planning to do and not have to worry so much about that. Partially, I think, because we've just always lived in that dynamic, and she makes it to some things and she doesn't for others. We've worked with a lot of couples that have expressed some similar kinds of tension. Well, one wife said that when her husband's biological kids were at their other home, her husband became withdrawn and didn't interact with her and her kids as much. And incidentally, her kids were in the home full time.
Right.
That we kind of mentioned that dynamic earlier. Yeah. So she felt like they just weren't enough for him. He'd eventually get excited about life again when his kids came back from their visitation at their mom's, and then he'd want everything in the home to be perfect for them, right? And what this husband was experiencing while his kids were gone is grief.
Yes, absolutely. And I can totally relate to that. It's really ongoing grief that hit me every time my daughter would have to leave. And I think so many bio parents who have shared custody can relate as well.
Yeah.
I really do. So today we want to explore some practical ways to manage the grief and lower the tensions in your home. So let's start first by just defining grief. Grief is the natural response to loss of a person or thing that are valuable or loved. Grief occurs on many levels, from emotional and physical to social and spiritual. Often those grieving a loss describe feeling overwhelmingly sad, but might also experience emotional numbness or feeling disconnected. Other symptoms of grief might be loneliness, nostalgia, anguish, anger, irritability, guilt, fear, anxiety, and worry.
Wow,
Yikes.
That's a lot to deal with and to think about. But let's unpack how this might apply within the context of blended family dynamics. Grief is a pretty natural process, or it's a natural response to loss. And in our context, a bio parent is experiencing a lot of loss. They're experiencing a loss of time with their kids, loss of connection, and just simply being close in proximity to their kids, right? They also sometimes experience a sense of this loss of control, or they might have this loss of feeling like they don't have the ability to protect their kids while they're gone. Like they can't see them. They're feeling unsafe, right?
Absolutely.
And all of those losses are routinely felt every time their kids have visitation with the other parent. Like Kim said, it's this ongoing grief, and it's repetitive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For me, when this type of grief would hit, it's this feeling of emptiness. Someone is missing. And because it's my child that I deeply love and I'm connected to, I'd feel a sense of emptiness or a void in my heart that would actually ache. I remember aching when Annika was gone.
Sure, and grief can impact us emotionally and physically, like you were just talking about, socially, and like you said a moment ago, even spiritually. And I'm sure that you experienced it in all of those ways, hon. But the social aspect really stands out for me because you definitely seem to shut down even with social interactions between me and with the kids. You just didn't feel like socializing outside the house either very much when we didn't have Annika with us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But the piece of this description that really stands out to me is that emotional numbness or feeling disconnected. I think that might be a significant challenge for a lot of bio parents that have remarried. They're grieving. However, they're trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for their blended family. But sadly, things don't feel normal when their kids are gone.
Well put. Yeah, that's easy to understand.
It's really difficult. And I can relate to feeling numb. Even back when I was a single mom and Annika was at her dad's house, I remember going for days without doing much of anything, simply because I wasn't feeling much of anything. Again, there was this emptiness inside. And feeling disconnected, that really hits home for me too.
Yeah.
Disconnected from the reality of our current situation. When I was grieving in this way, I found it was hard for me to feel connected to you, honey, and even to our younger kids, who are also my biological kids.
Right,
it's odd. Even though I wanted to stay connected, when the waves of grief would hit, I just couldn't do it very well. And I'm sure you noticed how I would kind of just check out,
Well, maybe I did notice a few times, yeah. I could definitely tell when you were struggling. Yeah. And it was really hard to know what in the world to do when the grief hit. I imagine it's hard for many of us to know what to do. And that's why we're recording this episode.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly why.
Yeah, because we want to be able to explore how bio parents can manage their grief well, because it's going to be there.
Yeah.
So let's learn how to manage it well. And how their partner, the step parent, can really support them and manage their own emotional tensions that come with it too, right?
Right.
So let's just see if we can tackle some of that. The first thing that anyone experiencing grief needs to focus on is not ignoring it.
Right.
Don't ignore your grief or try to bottle it or push it away.
Yeah.
Working through grief in a healthy way starts with acknowledging it and validating it as normal and understandable, even when it's painful.
Right.
When you're at the point that you're anticipating sadness, you know that the kids have to leave, rather than demanding that you just not feel sad. I'm not going to feel sad. I'm not going to be grieving, right? Even when you know it's coming anyway.
Right.
It's just better to accept that this is a normal response to loss and give yourself some permission to grieve when you need to.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting in his article, Scheduled Sadness, Why You Should Take the Time to Be Sad on Purpose. That's the title of the article. Psychologist Nick Wignall states this: you don't need less sadness. You need a better relationship with sadness.
I love that.
That's powerful. He goes on to say that most unhealthy or excessive bouts of sadness are the paradoxical result of trying to escape our sadness and the unwillingness to be with it. By making time to intentionally approach and be with negative feelings like sadness and grief, we actually train our minds not to be afraid of them. And the result is a stronger capacity to observe and tolerate our painful emotions without getting lost in them.
Yeah.
We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So Scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Absolutely. You know, in my grief, I found that when I chose to sit with my sadness for a while and release the pain, that my heart would lighten a bit and I'd be able to relax and enjoy more connection with you and the younger kids.
Sure.
And of course, the key is not to stay stuck in sadness, but to acknowledge it, allow yourself some time to simply be sad, and maybe choose to do some self-care, which we're going to talk about more in a minute. The goal is to describe your sadness and observe it, not to analyze it or fix it or even understand it.
Yeah.
And then you can move on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you'd like to check out Nick's article, which has a 5-step process to intentionally reflect on and be with your sadness, we'll put a link in the show notes for that. It's a great article.
Yeah.
But remember that avoiding sadness only makes things worse. Like Nick says, what we resist persists.
I like that quote. That's good.
So if you want to move beyond your grief so that you can re-engage with the rest of your family, don't resist your sadness, or it will likely persist. Mm-hmm. Now, honey, what advice would you give a spouse who sees that their partner is struggling because they're missing their kids? You know, was there anything that you remember doing that was helpful when Annika would leave and I was kind of in my funk?
Yeah, good question. You know, first, I'm not sure that I've been all that great at this along the way. In fact, sometimes I think I probably just sucked it right up. But I think there were times when I did okay at allowing you the time and the space that you needed to sit with your sadness.
I'd agree with that.
And really, any of us can actually do that.
Sure.
It's simply a choice to be patient when your spouse needs to do some scheduled sadness, you know, because chances are they're really going to need it.
Right.
So I would encourage spouses to give their partner the space and the freedom to grieve, even if you don't fully understand their grief. You don't need to completely understand it in order to understand that it is very real for them and accept that it's part of your journey. Yeah, it's part of the blending process. You can even prepare yourself a little bit by expecting your partner to be sad when their kids leave. And that helps you to keep your own expectations in line.
Right.
And, you know, once in a while, it doesn't happen. There were times where Annika went to her dad's and you did just fine. And then if I have my expectations in line, then I'm pleasantly surprised. Like, hey, things are going well. And maybe it's appropriate to ask your partner what they need during that time. Maybe they need to be alone, maybe not. Just let them know that you're there for them if they need you, but also be willing to just back away and give them a little bit of time.
Right. You don't want to schedule a big event or an activity the day that their kids leave.
Try to avoid that as much as you can. And also, if your partner does ask for time alone, or if they seem distant for a little while, this is really hard for me because I'm pretty relational, but don't take it personally. I used to take it really personally at times, that it was something about me or a rejection of me or something like that. But the truth is, it really wasn't about me. No. The grief that you were experiencing had nothing to do with me, but it had everything to do with the dynamics.
Absolutely.
And that's a difficult and painful dynamic to work through.
It is.
So it can be hard to remember that in the moment if you're the one feeling that rejection. But the truth is that it's not about you. Yeah. And that's a truth you can land on if you choose to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just affirm that, like I said, even before we were together as a family, when I was still single, the emptiness of missing my daughter was there.
Yeah, you were doing that long before.
Yeah, it was always been there ever since the separation from her dad. And just because I'd remarried and I was now part of our blended family with other relational connections, it didn't mean that suddenly I wasn't missing my daughter when she was gone from our home. That grief had nothing to do with you and our two mutual kids. It was the same grief I'd been struggling with for years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And you don't want to fall into the trap of believing that you are responsible to make everything okay for your spouse, right?
No.
Like no one can actually carry that burden.
No.
Your spouse is with you because they love you. Like there's a reason that they committed to you, and you add joy and happiness to their life. But all of that can't negate the fact that they're probably always going to be sad and miss their kids when they aren't in your home. Yeah. That child is an extension of them.
It's a natural response.
It is, and it's okay. So you can still be okay and give them what they need as they face their grief.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to ignore or resist our feelings, whatever they are, when we have to say goodbye to our kids and go on with life while they're away. We're going to intentionally acknowledge those difficult emotions and spend some time grieving if we need to. But let's talk about a few things that can help us to move through our grief once we've faced it. We cannot underestimate the value of self-care at this time.
Totally.
Now, some people think that self-care is selfish or really complicated, or that it's just a quick fix Band-Aid. But the truth is that you can't effectively care for others if you don't make time to care for yourself. In other words, you can't give what you don't have.
Yep.
Self-care is not selfish. It's critical if you want to be able to show up well and be your best self for those around you.
Yeah, and another truth about self-care is that it doesn't have to be complicated or elaborate, right? You kind of alluded to that. Self-care can be simple things, but they're done often. And it can be really any healthy activity that recharges your battery and feeds your soul. Self-care is not a quick fix Band-Aid. It's really your lifeline.
It is.
Without it, you can quickly burn out, you can lose your motivation, you can become resentful toward those around you. And all that's going to lead to, guess what? More sadness and grief, right?
Exactly.
So if you don't do this, it's not helping you and it's not helping the people around you. So let's talk a little bit about what self-care might look like. And it's really different for every person.
It's personal.
The key is we've got to find what makes sense for us and, kind of what adds to your life and lifts your spirits. Self-care is really a collection of habits that support and strengthen your mental health and emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And you've got to start building those habits with a critical mindset around self-care and grieving. That it's to practice being gentle with yourself. Listen to this quote from Nick Wignall. Ironically, most of us are quite compassionate with our friends, our family members, and loved ones, but we struggle to be compassionate with ourselves. This is especially true when we're struggling emotionally, which is tragic because it's exactly the time when we need self-compassion the most. So what he's saying there is just so true. It's tragic how we criticize ourselves and beat ourselves up for not being stronger. And we reprimand ourselves for not having it all together sometimes. According to Nick, there's a problem with this combative relationship with our own emotions. And that is, it only makes our emotional struggles worse. So then in addition to feeling sad, now you're feeling guilty for feeling sad. Instead of just feeling anxious, now you're angry at yourself for feeling anxiety. Nick goes on to say that the solution is to cultivate a habit of gentleness with yourself. Now, this isn't about being self-indulgent.
Oh, bonbons aren't going to help me?
No. Well, they might. But it's simply treating yourself with the same compassion you would a good friend who's struggling. So rather than attacking yourself when you're already down, choose some new self-talk that gives you some encouragement and then lean into a regular self-care routine. That's so important.
Yeah, totally. So, what might that look like for you? You need to think about it. We've got a few ideas for you to consider, but what we really want you to think about is what you can do to treat yourself with kindness and what really rejuvenates you. So like for me, I'm a high extrovert, and my go-to energizing self-care activity often is to meet with a friend for maybe coffee, or I have a men's group I meet with every week, or maybe grab a meal with a buddy or something like that. But I'm not 100% everything is about extroversion. I actually have a pretty solid morning routine where I spend time by myself in solitude. I read my Bible, I pray, and I have that alone time that really does help me as well. And those are things that fill my bucket and keep me going. And it's a self-care routine, really.
Yeah, I think you've journaled over the years too.
I have, I kind of am off and on that one. Yeah, I struggle with that sometimes.
For me, I need to spend time alone. Most often I get recharged by doing something tactile like crafting or gardening or physically moving. I especially love swimming, which is a really therapeutic way for me to process my thoughts, to breathe and move all at the same time. I feel like a whole new person after a swim.
Yeah.
I also enjoy reading, and I do keep a gratitude journal, which helps me to focus on all the positive things going on in my life. And I believe it's impossible to be thankful and fretful at the same time. They just can't coexist.
Yep.
Even going back and reading old entries in my gratitude journal can help me to move away from self-pity and embrace a more positive reality of my life, which is helpful.
That's really good. In a different article called Self-Care, What It Really Is and How to Do It Well, Nick Wignall gives 5 practical principles around all this stuff. He talks about the importance of taking care of your physical health, taking care of your social health, making time for pleasure mastery activities. I think that's kind of what you get into, that scrapbooking thing. But it can be anything that you enjoy doing and leaves you with a sense of accomplishment and mastery.
Right.
Now, Nick also explores what it means to practice being gentle with yourself and why we need white space in our lives, which really means deliberately leaving room in your schedule for relaxation and free time. So we'll put a link in the show notes to Nick's article. So if you want to learn more about this whole self-care thing and how to do it well, you can check that out. And again, spouses, if your partner needs time for self-care after their kids leave, allow them the space to do that. It's going to benefit you in the long run because they're going to then have the capacity to show up better for you and, whatever other kids might be in the home. And again, I just want to reiterate, try not to take it personally if they need time away from you or to, do that kind of self-care, right? This is a bit of a double whammy. Sometimes we take it personally that they're even grieving. And then if they're anything like Kim, who's an introvert who needs to get away from me and have time alone, then I'm taking that personal too. Like, what do you mean? Like, why? That story we told earlier, why aren't I enough? Or why aren't we enough? It feels that way sometimes.
Then you need to treat yourself with some compassion.
I do. Instead of kicking myself like I do all the time. So try not to take all of this too personally. Try not to think about it as they're getting away from you, but that they're choosing to care for themselves and their own emotional well-being, which is going to help them be there for you.
Right.
It actually lifts that responsibility from your shoulders as well. You don't have to be the fixer in this situation.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to be.
Yeah. Then when they're done, you can simply be that supportive person rather than expecting yourself to fix their difficult emotions. I said earlier, sometimes I just really sucked at this. And I think the times where I really didn't do well were those times where you needed that time and space. And I gave it to you, but then I built resentments. And then when you came back, I had an attitude.
Yeah, you were upset.
And that didn't help, right?
No.
I had to figure out how to not take that personally and move on in my own life.
Then I would feel guilty that you were upset.
Totally. Yeah. And remember, both partners need to remember, most of this, it's not about your personhood. It's about the dynamics around the whole situation. Yeah. And so we've got to get on the same team to face the dynamics
and
together.
Not take it personally.
Yeah.
So just a few thoughts around what a bio-parent might do in these dynamics to care for themselves and to help release that grief. A couple of things I did. I remember when Annika would leave for her dad's, I would sometimes just cry. Crying is a good release of pain. And I would just cry it out for a bit. And that would often help to just release that painful emotion.
And I can hear all the moms saying, that makes a lot of sense. But some of you dads, I want to say something to you. That is, this whole crying and grieving over your kids, that is not a wussy thing to do. Okay? Dads, it might be hard for you, but it might be exactly what you need to do. And I can tell you, over our 20-year marriage, I have shed a ton of tears, and there's nothing wrong with that.
As many, if not more than me.
Probably more. You can be like the ice queen sometimes, but I just want to encourage dads who are missing their kids. If that's something that needs to happen, don't hold that back.
Yeah, don't bottle it up. Let it out.
That's right.
Now, another thing I did was I looked at pictures of Annika. Baby pictures, current pictures, it really didn't matter.
We have no shortage of pictures.
No. And I happen to be a scrapbooker, so often I just spend some time scrapbooking pictures of her, and that would just help me to feel connected to her while she was gone. It also helped me to focus on some happy memories, and then I'd tell myself that we were going to have many more happy memories soon, which really just gave me something positive to look forward to.
Yeah.
And that was really therapeutic, and it helped to ease my anxiety. Other times I would just sit in her room, usually just sit on her bed. I'd look at her artwork and her toys and clothes. And again, this gave me a sense of connection to her while she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And doing an act of service for her while she was gone often helped as well. You know, fixing something or doing something she needed done. That happens to be her love language. So I knew that by doing something to serve her, that would make her feel loved when she returned. So just serving her while she was gone.
Sounds like you really leaned into the surrounding, like her bedroom and that kind of thing. You know, that might be great for some parents.
Yeah.
Other parents need to kind of close the door and compartmentalize that. And that's okay. So we're not saying this is the way to do it. Different people are going to grieve and respond in different ways. You need to find the way that helps you.
These are things that actually helped me to move forward.
Right.
But yeah, like you just said, honey, they might not be right for everyone. So take some time to discover what's right for you and then do those things.
Yep.
But don't let yourself get stuck in your grief.
That's the point.
Key. Now, I just want to throw out a word of caution around something you might need to be careful with. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But in your own grief, resist the urge to invade your kids' time in their other home. Excessive phone calls or text messages or even showing up in some way that's unexpected or intrusive, it's just not okay.
Yeah.
It might make you feel better momentarily, but it can be really disruptive for kids. You know, it's hard enough for kids to continually transition between two homes. This is a huge undertaking for kids. But when they're unable to truly relax and be present in each home, when they're mentally or emotionally being pulled back and forth through continual interaction, it can put kids in a really difficult position and tug on their loyalties. Kids need the freedom to simply be present where they are and be allowed to enjoy their time in that other home.
Yep.
And if we look at this through the lens of the golden rule, you probably don't appreciate your ex invading the kids' time at your home either.
Right.
Unless, of course, the kids are requesting to connect with the other home for some reason. The bottom line here is that you don't want to put your kids in a position of having to care for you emotionally when you're missing them.
That's right.
That just isn't fair to them, and they aren't equipped to carry that kind of burden. It simply isn't their responsibility to make you feel better. Now, if it's a regular thing to connect with the kids at some point during their visitation at the other home, maybe it's been stipulated in your parenting plan, it's agreed upon and expected, and it's also being reciprocated, that's fine.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
Continue doing that, especially if your kids are away for extended periods of time. But make sure that you're not purposely intruding on their time just to relieve your own discomfort.
Yeah, there's a big difference there.
That can disrupt the time that they're enjoying in their other home, and it could cause emotional confusion. So just be sensitive and careful when you're wanting to connect with your kids during their time with their other parent.
Yeah, and another thing that can have a negative impact is making a really big deal when kids are leaving or being overly dramatic, you know, around, I'm going to miss them so much, right? This can cause kids to feel a burden and sometimes even guilty for spending time away from you. And it might make them worry about you while they're away. And that just isn't fair to them. They didn't want or ask for any of these dynamics. So remember to keep your goodbyes as simple as you can. Just a simple, hey, I'm going to miss you while you're gone, honey, but I'm so glad that you get to spend time with your mom. I'm sure you'll have a great time. See you when you get back. This releases the kids' tension and it frees them up to simply enjoy the time in the other home. So finding ways to kind of cope with their absence and any difficult emotions that come along for you, it's your responsibility as the adult, which is really what this episode's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Honey, I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, but I think I had an easier time handling that initial separation than I did trying to get on board with fun and memorable activities when Annika wasn't with us.
Yeah.
And that can still be a struggle for me.
That's true.
Even though Annika's grown, she's now 25 years old, but she lives 6.5 hours away.
Yeah.
And I will always want her to be involved in whatever our family is doing. That's just the way it is. Just a few Christmases ago, I made everyone wait out in the cold for Annika to arrive before we could cut down our Christmas tree.
Yeah.
She was running late and I just couldn't bear her being left out of that family tradition.
And it was freezing cold.
It was.
And she was very late.
She was very late.
and it was frustrating.
Everyone else was very frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. It was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for the rest of us who are freezing and just wanted to get on with it. But understanding these dynamics and the strong emotions that are behind them can help the two of you as a couple to openly communicate about what you're experiencing and then focus on working together as a team to move forward.
Communication is so important around this.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what? For years, we did our best to make sure that Annika was included in as many of our family activities as possible, not just because we wanted her to know how much we loved her and that she belonged, but also to help Kim cope with the challenging realities of being separated from her daughter.
Yeah, you were really good about trying to make sure.
I tried, but then there were times where it was we had to move forward and we couldn't do it, and it's okay. But, this isn't just emotional tension for the bio parent. All these dynamics creates tension really for everyone in the blended family. Yeah. It's tough to navigate, but it can be managed.
It can. The bottom line here is that the more you can work through your grief and practice self-care, honestly communicate with each other and stay united, the better your family's outcome will be.
That's right.
And the more relaxed and present you'll each be when kids are missing from your home and life must go on.
That's right. Life must go on. Well, we really hope this episode has been helpful for you. We want you to know in your grief, you're not alone. We've been there. And so we're hoping that this just brings you a little bit of hope, a little bit of help. Yep. And we're just so grateful that we get to serve you. With that, that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.